Monday morning to you. My name is Dan Kopp, and I'm coming to you live from Madison, Wisconsin. And joining me today, like always, is Ty Fershing. Good morning, Ty.
Hey, good morning, Dan, and good morning, everyone. Thanks for having me. As usual, I'm coming from Entebbe, Uganda, in Africa.
Right on. Good to see you again today, Ty. We've been online in the background in the studio for a couple minutes now, and we're having some technical difficulties. I think on my end, usually it occurs on Ty's end because of where he is located in Uganda, but today it was my end, and we are coming to you live from our cell phones as opposed to our computers today. As always, we would invite comments and questions if you're watching the live, and if you're watching replay, feel free to reach out to us if you've got questions or comments, and we will do our best to answer them on air live. And as always, you can find us on our YouTube channel, Enhanced Leadership. If you'd like to get in direct contact with you, feel free to reach out and DM us on LinkedIn, or you can reach out to us and connect with us via our emails that are scrolling along the bottom of the page, ty@tradesecrets.com and dan@leadingbuffalo.com. So today we have a great topic. We're on a journey of becoming enhanced leaders, and we are helping others learn to lead confidently and become enhanced leaders. And today's topic is near and dear to our hearts, and it is called active discernment. So without further ado, Ty is going to lead us on this one. Ty, take it away.
All right, thanks, Dan. I was just thinking as you were speaking that the world's just going to come to an end if you're having technical difficulties and I have technical difficulties on the same day. So at least our world for this. Anyway, today is a great topic. It's called active discernment. And, if this was part of a conference, it would be 2 or 3 hours at least to go through everything that it encompasses. Not because of the difficulty of it, but because of the breadth of it, of what it covers. So I thought I'd break it down and give a little bit of a genesis behind it and a little bit of the concrete aspect and learning that we can gain from it, the knowledge we can gain from it. We always say things like to go through life, to be a leader, and Dan and I both believe you can be a leader at any age, but really what makes a leader is the exposure that the leaders have, the experiences that they have, and how they use those experiences and build upon them. And that's one of the components that is subtly integral to discernment, not active discernment, but just discernment. Okay, let's make a decision based on the information, and we make a decision and we go. We take it another level when we're talking about active discernment. And one of the things I can talk about, and I'm only going to talk for a second because I want Dan to chime in on this. When I was younger, I went to a lot of schools because I went at a time whenever you moved, you had to go to a school that was in that district. We weren't allowed to cross districts. Okay, so I went to 3 elementary schools. I ended up going to 1 junior high, and I registered for 4 high schools. So I enrolled in 4 different high schools. And all through that time, I'm like, Mom, I really, it wasn't a big deal for me to leave. She goes, well, just make friends like you always do. Just choose your friends wisely. And I never understood what that really meant. That had a huge overtone about discernment, about what it is to be actively discernment and personally and engaged in your life when you're doing stuff like that. And every time I'd be like, oh, this is my friend. And they would have to pass the muster of my mom and my dad. It's like, yes, he's okay to hang out with. He's not behind the gym smoking cigarettes or whatever like that. So years later, and that helped me adapt to go through, especially when in high school. Imagine going as a senior in high school to a different high school, let alone your sophomore, freshman, and junior years, like that. And I still employed. The friends I met were few, but I'm still in contact to some level with those that I met. The other ones that I didn't really engage with, they fell off the face of the earth anyway. So it really wasn't a big deal. But then I joined the military. And then the real one, Dan and I both have come to consensus that's the formative years. That's when you really, not joining the military, but the years from 18 to your mid-20s is really when you start defining who you are and how you're going to act in certain situations. And I remember one time I was in training, and I hurt myself in basic training, or AIT, one of the two, advanced training, and I had to wear tennis shoes because I hurt myself clearing a building where it was MP school. Dan, we were clearing a building, and I jumped through the window to clear, like TJ Hooker style, and I'm like that, and my shin hit that board right on the baseboard of the window, and it hurt. I mean, it was painful. And I was just like, and they put me on a profile. I had to wear tennis shoes for like 3 weeks. It was right before graduation, I think, when this happened. So I remember writing a letter home. I told my mom, yeah, I hurt myself, but I'm doing well. Blah blah blah. I told my mom. My mom writes, so it's all right to do well. It's all right to be personally engaged in what you're doing to do the best you can. But you have to use that discernment, and you have to decide when is that going to do you harm or when it wasn't. And it was this letter that was just a loving letter from mom, but with this lifelong lesson in it. I'm just sitting there like, wow. I go, and I started thinking about that, and through that, and the changes in my life and the experiences I that were handed to me, I started really understanding what my mom was saying. And my mom was like a leadership expert. I was just like, active discernment is what it's about, because you want to make sure that you take care of yourself when you're making decisions. You want to make sure that you're not violating any of your values, your engaged values that you have. You don't want them to serve your values, and you want to be able to sleep at night. You don't want to have personal inside conflict. Or self-care, which is also health and really an engaged value if you think about it. So I'm going to stop there before I move on. Dan, does any of that resonate with you? I don't know if you remember me getting hurt. Probably not.
I do not. But my first thought was there probably isn't a member of Gen Y or Z who has any idea who TJ Hooker was. Gen X, maybe. So that aside, I think we got the picture. I appreciate the value that your mother, the wisdom that she threw your way via, when you were a kid, via personal contact, or then a letter when we're in the Army and you're down in Alabama, for crying out loud. That's impressive. And as you've probably seen, and I've verbalized throughout our discussions together, Ty is much more cerebral in his approach when he does things, and he conscientiously thinks about things throughout. I'm more of a gut reaction type guy. It tends to work for me. Looking back, I didn't do a lot of active discernment. It hasn't been until the last 5 to 10 years that I've actually consciously thought about it versus just trusting my gut. But when I'm doing it now, I still let my gut answer first, and then I go through the thought process and think, all right, via active discernment, is my gut right? Well, it is. So I really wasn't conscious of it, and wasn't nearly as deep and cerebral as Ty was when we were young and in our formative years. And I concur with Ty in regard to, we really think that 18 to 25 year area in your life, that period is really informative to who you are as an adult. There are different schools of thought. Some people would have you think that you are who you are as an adult for experiences you had up through age 13 or 14. I personally can't, excuse me, can't go back and think I am who I am today because of something that happened when I was 10. I can't do that. All of my experiences were from when I was roughly 16 through about 25, that really informed who I am. Active discernment was not something that was all on my radar. It was about a gut reaction or a gut decision. Since I've been cognizant of it, I have thought through the process now, and I it's refreshing that my active discernment and my gut lead to the same answer. So that's where I am with active discernment, or where I got to be where I am. And Ty is much more again cerebral when it comes to things like this. He thinks a lot before he acts, and maybe I don't.
Well, thanks, Dan. I don't know if I may think a lot before I act, but still sometimes my existential actions probably aren't the best that they could have been at the time. Again, through experience, you learn, okay, I had something similar. It kicked in. There it is. That's what I need to encompass
Sure.
when I'm bring in the decision-making process. Um, Back to the 18 to 25, not to beat a dead horse or anything. I consider what my mom told me when I was a little kid about, just choose good friends. That was like little active personal engagement. It was just like, oh yeah, whatever, mom, and you run off. But when I was older, I saw it. And so maybe we do get something, but it's definitely not the defining. The defining part was when I was in basic training and AIT and really corresponding with my mom, and she would impart this wisdom. I'm like, wow, and even now I think about some of the letter. I'm like, wow, that's right. Like that. So, and as far as when we get back to the thinking, people say, oh, well, your discernment, that's just the same as mindfulness, what you're talking about. And I just cringe. I mean, that is so uncomfortable for me to accept that, because not that I'm bashing mindfulness, but it is not mindfulness. Mindfulness is just a practical, low effort entry point for self-awareness. Okay. To me, that's what mindfulness. And I always got, Dan and I both been to leadership conferences, and in the education world, mindfulness was a big thing. And this is why it's such a big thing for students, because it's low effort. Oh, if we can just teach them mindfulness, they'll do better. They'll be able to deal with the societal changes around them. And there is a certain credibility to that, but it's not the same as active discernment, because active discernment is when it encompasses the values that are true to you, your engaged values, and it encompasses your personal state, how you feel, is what your gut is saying to you, what your heart is saying to you. And through active discernment, that's a path towards enhanced leadership and purposeful living. Okay, to an extent, it gives you the ability to bridge your work and your home, because if you have those in place, everything seems to come together and mesh a little bit better. And active discernment also, it takes mindfulness to a more actionable and grounded and value-centered level. And that's the difference. It's not mindfulness, although I can see where mindfulness really has its appeal to people, because you don't have to think a lot about it, right, Dan? You like to lead with your gut. You don't have to think, hey, my gut's telling me this. Why would I argue with my body?
Right, right.
Like that. And so, the whole idea about active discernment, and if you haven't seen the other episodes that Dan and I have done, we've already talked about personal state and engaged values. But active discernment is a culmination of all three of those working together. You're making a decision. You're with all the possible information. You're not compromising your values, your engaged values, which is true to you. And it's not disturbing you, whether emotionally or physically. It's just there's a prepared state that you're in all the time, because that's who you are. If it's not disturbing that, you're probably on the right track for the decision you're about to make.
I agree, and I'm glad you linked all your main values of APE, active discernment, personal engagement, and engaged values, because what I like about active discernment, it really brings the personal state into the forefront of your mind. So before I started practicing active discernment, there were times where I would not feel right, whether it was losing sleep or be on edge because of a decision I made, perhaps assuming the worst. Was this the best decision? And I struggle with it, whatever. Once I took active discernment and actively embraced it, I realized mentally this was the right path. My gut was saying the same thing, and it made me become more satisfied, and there was an equilibrium within because of, well, my phone is sliding. Sorry about that. There was equilibrium within because I was aligned. Everything, active discernment allowed my personal state and engaged values, everything was in alignment. And whether you sleep better, feel better, just are better at who you are, active discernment can help you get there, because you really consciously think about the pros and cons of everything and get to the best answer. It may not be a great answer, because sometimes as a leader you're stuck with the answers that which one stinks the worst or the least rather. So they're all not great, but one must be a little bit better than the others. So even if you're in that situation and you use active discernment, you're going to have a better equilibrium within mentally and physically.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is the first time we've actually used alignment uh, in this context, because we both kind of stray from that, because we're not talking about the stars being in alignment or anything.
Right.
But what we are talking about is the capacities that we have as human beings are in alignment and true to ourselves. Okay,
Right.
what important to us value wise, what's important to us for our personal. If it disturbs you, if it's cringe, as they say, if it's awkward for you, then there's something hinky with it, like that. And the ability to make decisions based on all the possible information, and the decision isn't always the popular one, but it's the one that's best for everyone involved. And that's very important to put out, because sometimes you got to make that hard decision. And so I really like the fact you brought in alignment, because that's the first time we got to use it. If you've been following, Dan and I are on this enhanced leadership path, right? And we have this project that we're merging two different standalone leadership philosophies together. And so Dan's book, The Power of Me Leadership, or Be the Buffalo, as I call it, and mine is Active Personal Engagement. We have these two that we're blending together. And I really think that it's important to understand that both Dan and I have similar paths, similar philosophies, except his book is more externally geared to the actionable things outwardly. Mine's kind of intrinsic or internally geared, because it's what you have to do in order to make that decision and act outwardly. So we blended this together in hopes that, not in hopes, we know that by blending it together, it creates like a super enhanced leadership capacity that everybody can have. Because as soon as you start employing it, these habits become instinct. They become self forthcoming without having to think too much about it. That's really where we're ending up, as we're heading towards this wonderful thing called enhanced leadership, which is for anybody, not just seasoned leaders, but any leader, and it will propel you forward.
Absolutely. And ties internal thought processes along with my external approach to it. How do you get the right answer? Maybe you lead like King Arthur, an episode we previously did. You lead like King Arthur and you get input from your trusted advisors that help you make active discernment. You, through that lens, you make the right decision. And then that's where my tenets come into play. Like, all right, you've got a decision. Now what do you do with it? How do you deploy it? How do you get people on board? How do you use this decision that might not be ideal in the eyes of some people and still take care of those people who may be dissenting, those you are leading? And so the internal approach through Ty's lens, the external action through my lens, and the two come together and you've got enhanced leadership.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great process. And when Dan and I talked initially, we got, well, boy, we both have these similar leadership paths. We lead similarly, but it was so different in our approaches, but they meld together very well. And I think everybody has a modicum of, they know what their personal state is. Everybody knows what their values are, if not their core values, but what's important to you, your engaged values, the one you deal with on a daily basis. And everybody makes decisions. It's just a matter of having them work together to come to fruition in that decision-making process, which is the whole active personal engagement part, and the outward actionable concept of being a leader, and which Dan brings out in the tenets from his book. So.
Right on. Well, again, there's another topic we discussed today, active discernment, and we welcome questions and comments. If you're watching live at any given time, feel free to drop comments in the box, and we can address comments and questions while we are live on the air. And if you are watching this on a replay, either on YouTube or LinkedIn, feel free to drop questions and comments, and we'll do our best to address them in future episodes. And as always, you can reach out to us on our emails at the bottom of the screen, Ty at tradesecrets.com and Dan at leadingbuffalo.com. And you can always jump over on YouTube and check us out on our Enhanced Leadership podcast. Ty, any last thoughts?
No, I think we covered it all. Everything. We're done. No, I'm just kidding. No, Dan, it's always a pleasure to sit back and talk with you about bringing these two ideas together. And I'm really excited about the Enhanced Leadership and of course, the Enhanced Leadership Conference that's coming up next year. I'm really excited about that as well. So,
right on. Well, as always, good to see you, Ty. And for those of you who are listening and watching, we're simply talking leadership, and you can do it. Good luck.